Hey guys, Nathan here from Paramedic Preload with another podcast video on medication math and formulas. And I've previously discussed and hit on the IV drip medication administrations for like epi and lidocaine. And, you can use that same formula for so many other drips that we need to give, other than the dopamine drip. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about the clock method, because the clock method is something that for some people is extremely hard to understand, and that's totally okay. This is not for everyone. Some people have a very hard time wrapping their brain around that, and that's okay. I'm a very simplistic type person. I think a very specific way. So for me, the more simple I can make it, the easier it is for me. And the clock is a way where I can quickly get an answer of how I need to essentially give my medication and have a correct dosage on that. And we can use that IV drip medication formula, and it doesn't take that long. But once you get really, really good at this, there's very little that you have to sort as far as calculations on this. And so I really want to set it up, and I'll show you the epi. And then we talked about Lido in the last video and lidocaine and how the numbers are pretty much set always, right? Because it comes 2 grams and 500 cc's, and there is no variation of that. It is what it is. And epi has a lot of variation, but the cool part is we usually get to pick our variation, or our protocol dictates it for us, which means we still have a very concrete way of doing what we do. So let's dive into this clock method. Let's see if we can understand it, and if I can break it down for you guys. So hopefully this will make your guys' med math a lot faster, and you won't fret as much about having to do it in emergent situations. So let's start off with the Lido drip and the lidocaine drip. And as I mentioned, this is set. This is a set number. So that's kind of the easy way to set this. And then when we get to epi, we can watch it morph as we change our concentrations. So with the lidocaine, just a quick reminder. So here is our bag. And we're going to call this a 500 cc bag. And we'll put my little drip set down here. Sorry, I am a horrible drawer. But this is our 500 bag. And one of the things that we get in there is we get 2 grams into the 500 cc bag. But if you remember right, with the lidocaine, we give milligrams. So my goal with Lido is to give 1 to 4 milligrams per minute. That is my dosage for lidocaine for a drip, for a maintenance drip. 1 to 4 milligrams, but I'm dealing with, unfortunately, grams right here. So we got to convert that. So how are we going to convert this? Well, this goes back to those times I touched before about how many milligrams are in a gram. Well, there are 1,000 milligrams per gram. So that means if I put 2 grams in here, we have 2,000 milligrams. If I put 2 grams in, I have 2,000 milligrams. And so here is kind of the breakdown of the clock method. This is how it works. And I know that you're probably like, why is he venturing from that? Well, we'll come back to that here in a second. It's just important to know what you put in there. And I'll show you guys why. So the clock method only works with 60 drop sets. So if you're doing anything with a 10 drop or a 15 drop, you might as well just write this off. This is going to be a 60 drop set, and you'll see why. Also, this does not work for dopamine. There is a clock method for dopamine, but I highly caution against it because it is a roundabout number. There's a way to get pretty darn close, but it's really more to check your math than it is to actually administer it long term. It's really just to buy you time to get to a dial of flow or a pump. But with this, let's look at a clock. So here's our clock in a horrible circle at that. And we have pretty specific moments on our clocks. We have the 60-minute mark. We have the 15-minute mark, the 30-minute mark, the 45-minute mark, right? So essentially as a clock goes around, and there's 60 minutes in the hour, right? So we have the 60-minute mark, but of course the first it comes to is the 15, then the 30, then the 45, then the 60. So that being said, these aren't going to be minutes. What these are going to be is we're going to say these are drops. All right, so hopefully that seems pretty familiar with you. When we talk about the drops, we talked about it in the IV medication, like the drip medication, and we said that for 60 drops in a 60 drop set specifically. So let's put that 60 drop set means that 60 drops equals 1 cc. So that essentially is at 60 drops right here at the very top. That means that that's going to be 1 cc of fluid. So it's going to give us our concentration. So here's how simple this is. You have your 15, 30, 45, 60. They're your mainstays that we have on there. What we're going to do is we are going to take our number, the amount of medication, which is 2,000 milligrams of lidocaine, and we are going to draw this line down here, and I'm going to say I'm putting it into my 500 bag. So if you do 2,000 on a calculator, you put in 2,000 and you divide by 500, that's going to give you the number 4. It's very, very simple. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to put a 4 up here. Now, let's go straight down this way. What is half of 4? Well, that's 2. So let's put 2. And then now, what is between 2 and 4? It's going to be 3. So that only leaves one number. If you guys notice, we're not counting up, so we're missing a number here. At 15, it's going to be a 1, right? Between 0 and 2. So what that tells me right there is how many drops a minute to get this dosage. These are milligrams. So with my lidocaine drip, I want to give 3 milligrams per minute for my maintenance dose. Cool. 3 milligrams per minute equals 45 drops. I want to give 1. Cool. 1 milligram per minute equals 15 drops per minute. So if I give 15 drops per minute, that patient's going to get 1 milligram. If I give 30 drops a minute, they get 2 milligrams. If I give 45, they get 3. And if I give 60 drops, they get 4 milligrams. And the cool part about that is, once again, Lido is extremely stable in the fact that these numbers don't change because these come pre-mixed. So all I did was I took how much medication that I had and divided 2,000 by 500. And when I did 2,000 divided by 500, that told me at 1 cc or 60 drops a minute, I was going to be giving 4. That is my number right there. So it's 4 milligrams per cc. And then once again, from there, it's just divided up. So if I give only 30, they get 2. And if I give 15, they get 1. And 45, they get 3. So that is kind of the clock method and the basis behind it. Now, let me show you how that works for epi. The cool part, once again, about epi is we get to mix our drips, right? So we kind of get to choose how we want to do it. So if we want to choose, and let's say we want to do 2 milligrams into a 250 bag. So I want to do 2 milligrams into a 250 cc bag. Now we know for epi, our drip dosage is going to be 2 to 20 micrograms per minute. So I'm going to start off fairly simple with this one, but then I'm going to show you guys how this works as we kind of up our dose, because at this point we can get past 60 drops a minute. So how does that work? So we're going to get into that. Now, the first thing that we need to do is, if we're dealing with micrograms, but I'm putting in milligrams, so then what we need to do is we need to convert that to micrograms, right? And so there are 1,000 micrograms per 1 milligram. So it takes 1,000 micrograms to make 1 milligram, essentially, is what we're saying. So just kind of like we converted grams into milligrams, now we're converting micrograms, essentially, milligrams into micrograms. And so what does that equal? That equals 2,000. And I'm going to do a different number here shortly, and you'll see that as well. So we're going to do this 2,000. And we're going to divide 2,000. So 2,000, let me longhand it for you, by 250. And what that's going to equal is that's going to equal 8. So just as we did with the other, and that's going to be 8 mcgs. So we put our 8 up here and we go 8 micrograms, because what that tells us is for every cc that we give, or 60 drops, that's going to equal 8 micrograms, right? So now, as I do with everything, I always say, okay, what's half of 8? So there's 4. So at 30, 4 micrograms. What is half? What is the halfway point between 4 and 8? Well, that's 6 micrograms. And then I always consider essentially right here 0 to 4. What is that? That's going to be 2 micrograms. So if I have determined with my dose that's down here that I want to give 6 micrograms per minute of epi, so 6 micrograms per minute, well, how many drops is that? According to my clock, 45 drops per minute equals 6 micrograms per minute. If I want to give the full 8, then 60 drops per minute equals 8 micrograms a minute. And of course, that goes for 4 is going to be 30 and 2 is going to be 15. Okay, well, you say, all right, Nathan, here's the problem. I don't want to give 8. All of a sudden, I need to bump this up. I need to go to 12. Okay, that's cool. We can go to 12 still, because that's still within our 2 to 20, right? So here's what happens is you guys notice that there's kind of a trend here is for every 15 drops, it goes up by 2, right? So what I say is we go, okay, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, but I need 12. So we're going to keep going. We're going to go to 10. So 8 plus 2 is 10. And then if we go over here, so essentially we add another 2 to it, right? 2, 4. So 8 plus 4 is 12. And so we essentially go 60 drops plus our 30 drops that we need to get to. And we just equaled 90 drops. So at 90 drops per minute, that will give us 12 micrograms per minute. And so all you're doing is you're just continuing around the clock and adding up your drops. I added the 30 drops essentially. We went all the way back around. If I needed to go up to 14, well, then we would have just added the 45. So it'd been 45 plus 60. We would have went up those drops. And so as you can see, you can just keep going around that clock. And it makes it fairly simple on that. So let me go ahead and completely change up our bags and our dosage. And let's see what this does, because that way you can then start kind of working on how to process this information and our concentrations. So let's say you decide that you want to mix your epi drip 1 milligram into a 100 bag. You reach inside your bag. You're like, all I have is 100 bag left, and I have 1 preload of epi, 1 milligram left. Some people prefer to do their math this way and prefer to do this. And we can do it, and we can figure out how we want to mix that. And so if you do 1 into your 100 bag. So let's go with 1 milligram, which equals 1,000 micrograms. Now, the thing about the 1,000 micrograms is, just remember, we have to give epi in micrograms, right? And we put this into a 100 bag. So it's 100 cc's. So what we need to do is we need to take and we need to divide 1,000 divided by 100, because we have put 1,000 parts of this epi into 100 parts of that saline, right? So 1,000 divided by 100, and that is going to equal 10. So where does this go? Well, that says that at 10 drops per minute, the patient will receive, essentially, I apologize, at 60 drops per minute. Ooh, almost messed that one up. That's 10 micrograms. I apologize. So at 10 micrograms, we'll put that here. I apologize. There we go. And so we've got our 10 micrograms up there. And what that says is at 60 drops a minute, that will equal 10 micrograms. There we go. So that is 10 micrograms per cc. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, so we've got our 10 up there. Now, what's half of 10? Well, that's 5. And let's kind of fill in that gap. So here is going to be 7.5. And then on this side, between 0 and 5, it's going to be 2.5. So you guys notice that this actually skews the numbers a little bit. Probably not the best way to do our math, because if you wanted to get 2, well, now you're going to be setting your pump to under 15, and it doesn't really work out as well. But are the numbers there? Yes. Can we give 10 mics without really thinking? I can give it at 60 drops. Can I give 5 without thinking too much? I can give it at 30 drops a minute. If we needed to get to that 2, well, we might have to then pop it into our formula. So there's different ways to do this, but you guys can see the formula will work for you. And in reality, all I'm really doing inside my head, whenever I'm doing this clock, I don't draw all this out on scene. Essentially what I do is I say, okay, this is how many micrograms I'm adding in, and I'm going to divide that number by how big of a bag, which then gives me how much per cc I get, which is 10 mics. And so at that point, I just do the division inside my head and I go, okay, well, half of that's 5, and 0 to 5, half of that's 2.5. And if I'm 5 to 10, half of that's 7.5. And so there's my numbers right there. Now with me, I always mix my bags 2 and 250. So I always know what my number is going to be. I can just walk in and say, hey, this is it right here. I know that I've got my 8 a minute, my 8 mics per 60 drops, and I can go 2, 4, 6, and 8, and I can very easily separate my numbers. And if I need to, I can keep going around the clock. No matter how you do this, whether you put 4 into a 500, 4 into a 250, 1 into a 100 bag, you can do this multiple different ways to get your concentrations. And so just know that this clock method is just another tool that you can use that allows you to quickly do math in an emergent situation, plug in those numbers, and as long as you're able to kind of visualize that clock as you see it, it's really, really quick, especially if you're not very good at remembering formulas. This really only requires your one major calculation, which is the amount I'm putting into the bag. So it's the amount of medication I'm putting in divided by the amount of fluid I have inside the bag. And we just have to make sure that it's converted to whatever the unit is that we need to give it. So with this is micrograms versus lidocaine, which we were giving in milligrams, but came in grams. So just make sure you're doing that conversion and then divide that by how much fluid you're putting it into, pop it onto your clock, and boom, it gives you your numbers. So this is a very simple and fast way that you can do that math in an emergent situation. I hope it helped. Let us know if it did. Other than that, we will see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much.